Okay, so today's webinar is our sort of introduction to Nebula. So it's designed to be fairly short and give you a brief idea of what Nebula offers, why you might be interested in it, how it saves you time and money. If you're already an existing Nebula user and you're interested in some of the new features and changes that were made just recently to Nebula with what we're calling our 8.1 rollout, that will be covered in a couple weeks. You should be getting webinar invites sent via email very shortly for that. So that's coming up first Thursday in December, I believe. So again, if you're interested in finding out all about all the new stuff, that's not today's webinar. That's the next webinar about Nebula coming up. Today is just introduction to Nebula. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So what is Nebula? Nebula is our what we call a cloud-hosted network management service. Basically, the idea is to reduce the amount of time you spend needing to set up equipment and making it easy for you to easily manage multiple customers, multiple networks, keep an eye on them, see what's going on. So basically, whether you're using the switches, access points, or NSG gateways, some combination of all three, you'll do the management through a single pane of glass. You just log into nebula.zyxel.com, and all of your networks and configuration is done through that website. There's no software, no hardware needed. It's all done through Amazon Web Services, and it is free. So unlike most of the other solutions out there, there is no mandatory licensing to be able to use it or caps on the numbers of devices you can manage with the free version. So let's talk a little bit about why you want to manage things in the cloud. We're going to go through each of the different steps here of what you normally need to do to deploy a network for one of your customers. So to begin with, you need to purchase the equipment. So that stays pretty much the same. Installing the equipment. This is an area where we save you time, maybe some money. Installation is literally just plugging it in, making sure it has power and an Ethernet connection. In most networks, there is no on-site configuration required, so you don't need to send out one of your experienced techs. You just need to send somebody out who knows where the devices go and knows how to plug them in. There's no need to worry about monitoring. The cloud itself handles the monitoring. You don't need to worry about setting up remote access. As long as these guys can reach the internet, you can reach them. No ports need to be forwarded. No VPN tunnels need to be created. You don't need a monitoring platform, so you don't need something like SolarWinds or Zabbix or one of the other platforms. You can do it all through the cloud. However, having said that, we do work with those other guys, so if you've already got something you like to use, you can continue to use it with Nebula. We go ahead and host the logs in the cloud for you, so particularly if you're using the Pro Pack, you don't need to worry about setting up your own data storage to store those logs for you. Updates are handled through the cloud. It's in a simplified manner. Firmware updates are handled automatically through the cloud through pushes. So basically everything is done OTA for you. Then you set up your user and device management. So the idea here is obviously all those squares that are gray color rather than green are areas where you're saving time, saving money, or saving both. So we'll talk a little bit here about how Nebula works. So to begin with, one of the big benefits here, and we sort of already hit on this, is you can set it up without unboxing. Basically, all you need to do is scan a QR code on the device or on the outside of the box for the device. So the benefits there are, the only setup you need to do is scan that QR code. If you've got product that you store yourself locally or you have it shipped to you before going to the customer, when it's ready to, just before you ship it out to the customer, simply scan in those boxes without needing to open it and assign them to the customer location. Once you've done that, once somebody gets around to actually taking them out of the box and installing them, they'll automatically register with the cloud, find out which network they're supposed to be on, and download their configuration, which leads us to up and running in minutes. So again, there's no local configuration required, and Nebula by default has what should be for most people be a functional network. So there's not a lot that needs to be done for basic functionality. Configuration itself is done through a streamlined web GUI, so it doesn't take a lot of time to get things up and running. I used to do a demo which started with creating my first ever Nebula account setting up a customer and getting the equipment up and running. So we had a wireless access point that was providing a captive portal for guest access. And the whole ball of works there from signing up to having everything up and running was less than 5 minutes. So just to reiterate this here, everything is done through the cloud. So there's no hardware you need, there's no cloud keys, there's no wireless LAN controllers that need to be purchased and set up. Just the equipment itself that runs the network. There's no software that needs to be installed on a computer or on a virtual machine or on a server someplace. Just our hardware. Once you've done that, once you've plugged it in, all of your hardware that you've installed for all of your customers and all of their sites is accessible anywhere you've got an internet connection. We have our mobile app. This is what you use to scan those QR codes in. Works with iOS and Android. It can be also used to keep an eye on what's going on in your customer networks. If you're using ProPack, we can give you push alerts when devices go offline. You can do some basic wireless configuration, but most configuration will be done through a web browser rather than the app. The app also lets you take photographs as you install the equipment, and those are stored in the cloud. So if someone else needs to go on site, or you need to go on site months or years later to troubleshoot or swap out some equipment, you can reference those photos to see where that particular device is installed in the customer's location. And we provide lots and lots of different ways to do guest access. We can do captive portal just by using our access points, as long as you're only providing captive portal to wireless users, so no gateway required from us. If you want to provide captive portal across wired interfaces, our NSGs provide that. Captive portal has a lot of flexibility as far as customization. We've got a basic template you can use. You can put in some logos in there to customize it a bit if you want something more than that. We allow you to download the CSS files and the HTML files, modify them however you want, and then re-upload them to the Nebula cloud for us to host that for you. We can point to an external page you host yourself for login. We can do terms of service, usernames and password. We can have the guest register themselves with an email address. We can have them log in with Facebook. So a lot of different options there, whether you're providing corporate access to visitors at an office or whether you're providing public hotspot at an airport, at a cafe, at a hotel. So we'll talk a little bit about the wireless LAN functionality here. Nebula by default supports something we call Smart Mesh. So if you're setting up a wireless network, not all of your APs need a hardwired connection. Those that don't will automatically detect that there's no hardwired connection and find devices that do have it wirelessly and create a wireless mesh for you. It can also be set up so if something goes wrong, someone unplugs a cable, the AP automatically switches into a mesh mode for you. Of course, we support WPA2 security, including enterprise, 802.1x authentication to a Radius server. And we support a bunch of the standards when it comes to wireless roaming, load balancing, so 802.1r, KV, as well as a number of our proprietary implementations for legacy devices that don't necessarily support R, K, and V to smooth over the process. When it comes to our switches, we provide intelligent PoE, not just using the official 802.3 classification system. You can set it up so we automatically monitor any PoE device. We know how much power it needs, peak power it needs, and we'll allocate the power that way. So it allows you to plug in more devices onto a switch with the same power budget in many cases. Provide another number of network protection features, including ACLs, VLAN configuration, 802.1x authentication, loop guard, DHCP server guard, IGMP snooping, and we provide the ability to virtually stack all your switches. So when you go in to manage things, we don't really care which physical switch it's on. You just select the ports you want to configure and go from there. Okay, so we've got a question here from Donald. This is going to the NSGs, asking about setting up static WAN IP addresses. So again, for most networks, everything you plug it in, you get an IP address. and you're good to go. If you're using WAN IPs or any sort of static IP where you need to manually configure that, initially that is done on the device itself. So you simply find out the device's address. We've got a default address if there's no DHCP, and you can log in locally to set up the static IP address information. Once you have set up the static IP information and everything connects to the cloud, you can then use Nebula to change that static IP should you need to do it in the future, knowing that something's coming up. But yes, if you don't have DHCP on the network, or in the case of a gateway, you need to manually configure the WAN with a static IP address from your ISP, you just do that locally, and then from then on, everything else is in the cloud. Okay, back to over-the-air updates. So all configuration changes are done in the cloud and then automatically pushed out. Firmware upgrades are automatically pushed out. Now, those firmware upgrades can be scheduled. So, you know, by default, I believe we do it Sunday at like 2 a.m. is when we by default push out new firmware. But you can go in there and schedule the date and time that you prefer for doing your updates. You can schedule different times based on the type of device. So your gateways can be updated at one time, your access points can be updated on a different day, etc. When we push out configuration changes, we have some smart checks that go in there to make sure things are being updated in the correct order so as you don't lose connectivity. I'm sure everyone out there who's been doing networking for a while has screwed up the order that they're applying their VLANs and suddenly lost the ability to manage one or more devices on the network. So we check for things like that, and we'll make sure to apply those changes in the correct order so nothing loses connectivity. Or alternately, we'll come back and say, hey, wait a minute, we can't do those changes. There's an error there, so you can change things in a different order. So if you're using our security gateways and you're creating site-to-site VPNs, it could not be simpler. Basically, you set up your sites, go into the VPN configuration, select which sites need to have a site-to-site connection, and then decide whether you want to use a star topology or not, and then click apply. And we handle everything else that's involved with doing those site-to-site connections, provided it's between NSG gateways. And again, Nebula was designed from the ground up to make it easy for you to manage multiple customers and multiple networks under your customers. So when you log in, this is what we call our MSP view. So it gives you a snapshot of all of the organizations that you manage. So in Zyxel speak, an organization is essentially your customer whose network you are managing, or at least helping them out with. So you'll get a snapshot there of all of them, whether they're using the free version of Nebula or the professional pack, how many sites they have, how many devices they have, whether they're online or not. So you choose your customer, and there we go. Choose your customer, and you'll get a breakdown of all of the sites that that customer has. So if you're doing small offices, there will only be one site, but if you're doing somebody that's got multiple offices or multiple locations, you'll see all of their sites there. You can physically have those sites represented on Google Maps to give a visual representation of where they are. And again, you'll get a snapshot of what's going on all of those sites, how many users they have, how many devices they have, etc. And then once you drill down into a specific site, you get taken to the dashboard for the site. We've got two versions of the dashboard. We've got the version you see there. So if you're managing multiple types of devices, this is the dashboard you'll see. If you're just using Nebula access points and everything else is not done through Nebula, we have a dedicated wireless version of this dashboard to remove some of the clutter there. So what you're seeing there is, how many devices you have, how many are online, how many wireless users are online, PoE utilization versus power budget. And if you're using our NSG and have the NSS security services activated, we'll give you a pie chart showing you which applications are using all your bandwidth. So it's not on user base, it's not MAC address based. We're telling you by the individual application. We can recognize that and let you know whether it's Facebook, whether it's Netgear, whether it's YouTube, whether it's BitTorrents, whether it's file transfers. We can tell you that and tell you which users are using most of that bandwidth. In addition, up here at the top, we make it really easy for you to jump between sites or jump between customers. So just pull down menus. It'll show you all of your accounts right there to quickly jump between. And then if you want to configure something, we've got pull down menus here to take you into the switch and AP and gateway configuration screens. So again, Nebula is free. So it gives you management for an unlimited number of devices, for an unlimited number of customers, and an unlimited number of sites. It's not one of those things where, oh, you get 2 devices free and then you got to start paying. Everything is free in the core version of Nebula. We do offer licensing and some extra features through ProPack, and we'll get to that in a few slides here. So again, Nebula works with our switches, our access points, and our gateways. The gateways need to be our NSG series. Our switches, we have a dedicated Nebula series, the NSWs, but it also works with our GS1920V2s and XGS1930s. And then our access points, it basically at this point works with all of our access points except for 2 models. So chances are whichever access points you're using, they can, if you so desire, to be managed with Nebula, which leads us to Nebula Flex. So Nebula Flex, you'll see that on the price list, on the product descriptions. That's just letting you know that piece of hardware can be managed standalone or traditional, however you want to describe that, or can be managed through the cloud. And you can switch back and forth between management modes as time goes on. Although configurations and some features are not identical between modes, so you can't switch between without having to reconfigure. Then if you're looking at our access points, you will see some of them are called Nebula Flex Pro. So what's the difference between Nebula Flex and Nebula Flex Pro when it comes to APs? Nebula Flex Pro APs can also be managed through a wireless LAN controller. So that can be one of our standalone NXC controllers or through one of our UAG, USG firewall gateways, which have built-in wireless LAN controller. So obviously the idea behind this is, you can standardize on specific models of switch and access point, regardless of whether that particular customer is going to be using a controller, standalone management, or cloud. So you don't have to buy different models for each one. In addition, Nebula Flex Pro APs include 1 year of ProPack license with them. So switching between modes is really easy. You plug in the hardware. If you want to use it with standalone, you're done. You're good to go. If you want to manage it in the cloud, you simply assign the device to a customer site. The device, after a minute or 2, will detect that you have assigned it to the cloud and will automatically switch over to cloud mode. And if at some point you decide you no longer want to use it in the cloud, same thing. Log into Nebula, remove it from that customer site and organization, and it'll automatically reboot back into standard mode. So now we'll talk a little bit about our licenses. So the main license that you'll encounter is our Professional Pack. So Professional Pack is designed to add extra features that aren't normally in Nebula. It's primarily focused on MSP-oriented things, so additional logs. We're storing a year's worth of logs in the cloud instead of a week's worth of logs. We have an audit log, which tracks every configuration change and when it was made and which user made those changes to help you with troubleshooting. And we've added a ton of additional reports into the cloud that you can generate on a scheduled basis, giving you a visual representation of what's going on your network. Our Wi-Fi report, which lets you know which users might be having issues with their signal quality at their location, IPTV reports, et cetera, et cetera. On the switch side of things, it opens up more granular control of your bandwidth rules, allowing you to set both uplink and downlink switch level ports, user level stuff there. We've got our IPTV report. It opens up some additional IGMP multicast settings that you can tweak and gives you a report of which channels users are watching, which users are watching which channels, and we automatically detect a number of different quality of service issues, drop frames, things like that, and we'll let you know, hey, this is what you need to do are what we suggest you change to solve those issues. Just showing you the different reports there. As I mentioned before, we give you a wireless health report. We also unlock some features that make it easier for you to manage multiple sites. So we give you the ability to clone settings on a site or organization basis. Most of us out there, if you're setting up a network, 95% of the settings are the same from one customer to another. So you can clone an existing customer and then just change the things that need to be changed for that particular customer. If you're managing multiple sites, we give you the ability to use templates. At the moment, it's limited to switch features, but those will continue to be enhanced, which will allow you to make a change and push it out to multiple sites simultaneously, and give you the ability to do an offline backup and restore capability on the settings. And we add in there Facebook Wi-Fi, which is different than Facebook Login, as a way to do captive portal for your guests. So all of those things are what you get and unlock with going to the Nebula Professional Pack. The other type of license we have is our Security Pack. So this is for our NSG gateways, and this unlocks for you antivirus, content filtering, intrusion detection and prevention, the ability to use our application intelligence to make firewall rules and reports based on the individual application or functionality of the application, rather than messing with IP addresses and destination ports and things like that. So all of our NSGs come with 1 year of security services out of the box. So you don't need to buy additional licenses until that expires. I'm going to give you a number of different reports. And like the Nebula Pro Pack reports, you can set these up to automatically be emailed to yourself or emailed to your customer, and you can add your own logo into those reports to give yourself some self-branding on there. As I mentioned before, we've got the ability to do set up rules and reports based on individual applications. I forget how many thousand different applications. We can recognize their traffic and classify them based on the application. Let you know what's going on as far as your antivirus, how many attacks have been blocked, who's been attacked, where those attacks are coming from. So to summarize here, Nebula itself is free, unlimited devices, unlimited number of customers, unlimited number of sites. Gives you all of the functionality that you would expect to have inside your devices as far as configuration goes. So this is always free. You can upgrade to the Professional Pack, and that's available as either an annual license or as a lifetime license. The lifetime license is a perpetual license. So basically, for the price of doing Meraki for 1 year for an access point, you can do Nebula with Professional Pack for the life of the product and never have to buy another license again. If you're going the annual route, if that annual license expires and you don't renew it, it will just fall back to the free version of Nebula. So you're never going to get locked out of your devices if you don't pay extra money. And then the Security Pack is independent from Professional Pack. It's just for the NSG gateways, and it unlocks those UTM features. So briefly, we'll talk about the hardware. We've got 4 different models of NSG Security Gateway. All of those include 1 year of Professional Pack, 1 year of the security license. The main difference between them is just the throughput, how much horsepower they have to pump stuff through, and maybe a little bit of different configuration on the ports. On the switch side of things, we have our dedicated NSW switch series. Those all include 1 year of the Pro Pack. And then we've got our GS1920V2 series and XGS1930 series. Those are all Nebula Flex. Those can be managed either standalone or with Nebula. They do not include any Pro Pack, so if you want Pro Pack, you need to buy a separate license to add it. And then here's all of the access points. So really complicated slide. If you want a copy of this, reach out to Jacob, Sandy, or Ivan, and they can send you a version of this to reference later, because it's a lot to go through. But the short version is all of our APs, just about, can be managed with Nebula, and a bunch of them include different lengths of Pro Pack license with them. So now, if you haven't played with Nebula before, go ahead and give it a try. You can just go to nebula.zyxel.com. We have a demo account listed on the page there. Just log in with those demo account credentials. and you'll have access to our demo site with some real data from 3 different hotels. In addition, if you are one of our partners, you have joined our partner program as a reseller, you can ask your salesperson for a 60-day Nebula demo kit, and they'll qualify that and send that out to you. So, with no further ado, that ends today's webinar. I know I went through it kind of fast there for you. Didn't want to dwell too much on things, but if you have any questions, go ahead and send them in using that Q&A box. And I will try to answer them for you. Well, we're waiting here to see if anyone sends anything in. Just a reminder, we've got a number of different webinars. We're usually doing at least one a week on all sorts of different topics, so be sure to check those out. As I said before, Nebula just rolled out a pretty major upgrade at the end of October, and we will have a webinar coming up here in a couple weeks where I will go through all of the different changes and new features that we've added to Nebula. So if you're interested, be sure to sign up for that. And just in addition, we'd love your feedback. Let us know how we're doing on these webinars. If there's any topics you'd like to see us cover going forward, let us know. We rely on your feedback as to what you are interested in and create our webinars based on that. So if you've got things you want to see, let us know. Whether it's product overviews, whether it's a sales training, whether it's a best practices, let us know what you're looking for. You can just tell your salesperson or you can email me. My email's up there on the screen. And I am not seeing any questions come in. So I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. If you're typing something up, go ahead and highlight it and copy it and email it to me directly, and I'll answer it for you. But otherwise, thanks for joining us today, guys. I really appreciate you coming out, and be sure to give us some feedback.